former president of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, was one of the African leaders that left behind a highly important legacy. He redefined himself throughout his life, and he is best known for his support of the United States of Africa. Despite his 40 years in power, Gaddafi still had high hopes for both his country and Africa. The story of his downfall is greatly influenced by love, money, and betrayal. That landmark he erected, however, remains one of the most astonishing of the 21st century. Under his dictatorship, Gaddafi lavished love and affection on a particular country, its people, and its president. Ultimately, it was this same president, whom he regarded as a friend, who had betrayed him. You had me right, so who could this betrayal be? Let's find out. 2016 saw the publication of a letter by Ugandan President Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, denouncing the involvement of the United States and the African Union in Libya and the wider Middle East. He continued by saying that Saddam Hussein's regime in Iraq could not have been overthrown by the US or the EU. Why, therefore, did Yoweri turn on Gaddafi? Before we go into great detail about why, let's examine how they ever got to know one another, how their friendship developed, and what transpired when Museveni had to turn on his friend. Museveni's election did not mark the beginning of Gaddafi's relationship with Uganda. Since the 1970s, when Idi Amin was in power, Gaddafi had maintained a close friendship with Uganda, a nation he deeply loved. He gave this country so much support, a moral economy, and military backing to Amin's government. Throughout this time, a single person would consistently deploy troops and military support to defend Idi Amin's administration whenever it came under threat. There was only one person involved, Gaddafi. However, despite all of his kindness and assistance, he was deceived, as we will soon see. Idi Amin left the country in 1979 for Libya, where he eventually moved and lived in Saudi Arabia, having faced numerous attacks and acts of resistance. Uganda chose to hold elections to select its new leader following Amin's overthrow in 1980. Since Museveni did not like the outcome, he did what any other politician desperate for power would have done. He said that the polls were biased and that the outcome was unfair. As a result, Museveni and his opponents started a civil war in Uganda. Arms and ammunition ran low for Museveni and his soldiers. He would require assistance from someplace throughout this battle. This was a conflict he had to win. He had a terrible appetite for power. Then, what did he do? Museveni needed to get help. He only approached the United States and the United Kingdom for assistance with arms. Because of his connection with Gaddafi, his appeal was dismissed. Then he went to see Gaddafi, his nation's closest ally. Gaddafi never wavered and provided him with all the support he required to win the war. Museveni nevertheless prevailed in the 1986 Ugandan Civil War, for which Gaddafi provided support on a number of occasions. Libya provided Museveni's men with training following Paul Kawanga's defeat. Museveni even dubbed his SIGINT agency after its counterparts in Libya. Gaddafi showed Museveni so much love and support. Gaddafi traveled to Uganda multiple times, giving the impression that it was his second home. He made numerous investments and built a great deal of infrastructure in Uganda. Gaddafi purchased 51% of Uganda's telecom company's shares and threw away the portfolio of investments made in Libya and Africa. Uganda Telecom and 60 shares in TriStar Limited, a textile company. Gaddafi went so far as to pressure Museveni to refrain from exporting Uganda's raw oil to the West and Europe. In Kenya and other neighboring nations, he assured him he would assist him in setting up a refinery and pipes. Not only that, but Gaddafi also made significant investments in Uganda's real estate and finance industries, investing in numerous businesses, including the Tropical Bank of Africa, National Housing Corporation, Lake Victoria Hotel. Examining Gaddafi's interest in the Turo Kingdom is another thing to consider. It was in 2001 that Muhammad Gaddafi became interested in this kingdom inside the borders of Uganda. Muhammad Gaddafi's great love for this kingdom led him to support most of its endeavors, including building the Turo Palace, even though its ruler Oyo Mayimbo, was only 9 years old at the time. In the Muslim community of Uganda, Gaddafi left a profound legacy. His contributions to the building of the magnificent mosque there, which can accommodate at least 3,000 worshippers, were substantial. In Eastern Africa, this mosque continues to be the second biggest. During his visits to Uganda, Gaddafi even made jokes about asking Museveni to govern for life. He asked him why he would even bother running for office. Why did Museveni decide to remove Gaddafi? Mohammed Gaddafi's objectives and Western interests will be the two main areas of focus of our investigation. As you may already be aware, whenever the idea of a United States of Africa has been discussed, the most prominent person brought forward is Mohammed Gaddafi. The creation of the United States of Africa was envisaged in his plans for African unity. Gaddafi put a lot of work into the pursuit of African unification, just like Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah did. Gaddafi was successful in persuading 45 heads of state to support the creation of an African Union during a conference that took place in 1989, replacing the African Union. Approximately 15% of the funding utilized for African Union programs originated in Libya under Gaddafi's administration. But for some African leaders and Western powers, this was a concerning idea since they thought it may distort their standing, influence, and status in the area. African leaders disagreed on the idea, which created debate. This plan was unexpectedly opposed by Yoweri Museveni as well. Gaddafi had helped Museveni a lot in the past, even helping him rise to positions of power in Uganda. Gaddafi supported him in difficult times and made enormous investments in his nation. Why did Museveni reject Gaddafi's idea for the establishment of the United States of Africa? Initially, it posed a challenge to his authority in Uganda. In a conciliatory manner, he accepted Gaddafi's perspective, but did not challenge the route. He would not submit to another leader's authority. Either he or no one else will do it. Second, Museveni's influence was growing in the region, and as such, he used military force to advance Western interests in countries like Somalia. He also assisted the leaders of the CIA intellectually. He put the interests of the West ahead of those of his fellow Africans by doing this. Upon the resolution's introduction during the 2007 African Union meeting in Accra, Ghana, Museveni forcefully overthrew it. Adopting the concept of African unification, in his opinion, would complicate relations with the West. He knew that these people held him in authority and that they could remove him at any time. Museveni was also concerned about the problems he would face in his military and financial affairs after turning against Gaddafi. He was very aware that it was far simpler to oppose Gaddafi than it was to oppose the West. Museveni's responses accelerated the betrayal of Gaddafi. Museveni gave his approval to Assistant Secretary General of State for African Affairs, Jende Fraser, on June 13, 2008, following his son's graduation from college in the United States. Because of the linguistic and cultural variety of the continent, he said, he did not see the need for a united Africa. He proceeded to assert that Gaddafi bought off small African nations to support him and prevented them from speaking out at the African Union and other international gatherings. Museveni said he expected an attack on his aircraft over international space if tensions with Gaddafi continued to rise. The United States of America granted him the backing he requested. Museveni's popularity in Uganda was more concerning to Gaddafi than his ties to the United States. Gaddafi's 2008 unexpected visit to Uganda was seen by Museveni's administration as a planned assassination attempt on their president. In an abrupt turn of events, Gaddafi stated during a 37-minute speech at an Arab youth event in Uganda that he was now interested in working with traditional leaders rather than elected presidents to achieve his goals for the United States of Africa. He invited a few traditional African leaders to a meeting in 2009 to talk about the unification of the continent. Museveni forbade traditional rulers from Uganda from attending the conference after learning of this. Museveni had successfully persuaded Gaddafi that George Bush, the U.S. president at the time, had lifted sanctions against Libya and would invest in his nation if he dismantled his WMD. Gaddafi was informed that Museveni had sold him alive after speaking with a few British diplomats. This was the worst mistake Gaddafi made, and it led to his downfall. He had no powerful nuclear weapon that could destroy indigenous forces. From that time on, Museveni has been trying to take Gaddafi's place and promote financial and security unification throughout Africa. Although he is capable in many areas, he lacks the charm and resources necessary to do this task. In the event that he succeeds, he might not receive support. For the same reason that they opposed Gaddafi in 2021, even the West will not do so. Museveni stated that the plans of the Western nations were constrained in one of his talks. Interestingly enough, he had marketed Gaddafi to the same people. The mosque was initially constructed in Uganda under the name Gaddafi Mosque, but it was renamed 2 years after his overthrow in order to appease the local authorities. In order to make room for the new Libyan government, the Uganda Muslim Supreme Council removed the name a few years after Gaddafi was killed. I hope watching it was enjoyable for you. Tell us what you think about this discovery by using the comment box below. To ensure you don't miss any of our fascinating content, please turn on the notification bell and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.